A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down.
China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
Two overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement.
Workers have voted down a recent offer, and the current agreement expired at midnight.
Breaking developments out of Washington have unsettled political insiders and industrial leaders as an unexpected shift sends shockwaves through the American aerospace sector. Few anticipated that Canadian firms would secure a sweeping victory on U.S. ground, winning multi-billion-dollar contracts tied directly to Boeing's future production and support operations. The news landed heavily across supply chains stretching from Seattle to Wichita, where executives and workers alike now confront the possibility of financial strain and job losses. This outcome did not emerge overnight. It reflects years of deliberate planning by Canadian policymakers and corporate leaders who steadily refined strategy, built alliances, and positioned their aerospace sector for a breakthrough that many in the United States failed to foresee. The shift carries particular political weight because it collides directly with long-standing promises made by Donald Trump. Throughout months of rallies from Ohio to Florida, Trump spoke with confidence about his tariff agenda, insisting it would shield American aerospace jobs and secure the future of workers tied to Boeing and its vast supply network. He repeatedly argued that foreign competition, especially from Canada, would no longer threaten livelihoods in states such as Missouri, South Carolina, or Washington. His message was clear. Firm trade barriers would protect American labor and restore industrial strength. At in 2024, the White House enacted sweeping tariffs on imported aircraft components and promoted them as a protective guardrail for domestic manufacturing. The administration argued these measures would stabilize wages, preserve existing jobs, and even encourage expansion by forcing companies to keep production on American soil. On factory floors across the country, those assurances were received as a promise that Washington understood the stakes. For many workers, their paychecks and long-term security depended on Boeing remaining strong and firmly rooted in the United States. That confidence faltered when Ottawa announced its aerospace breakthrough earlier today. Canadian officials revealed that domestic firms, backed by public investment and supported through a highly coordinated web of global partnerships, had secured supply and service agreements once considered unattainable. The deals encompass aircraft fuselage assembly, avionics integration, and long-term maintenance programs valued in the billions. Crucially, these responsibilities will be anchored in Quebec and Ontario rather than in Seattle or St. Louis, where many had expected growth to occur. From Boeing's perspective, the decision was framed as pragmatic rather than political. Executives viewed the move as a way to avoid tariff-driven cost pressures while gaining access to a stable, well-trained production base just beyond U.S. borders. Canada offered favorable terms, predictable regulatory conditions, and relief from trade barriers that increasingly complicated operations inside the United States. For the corporation, it was a rational adjustment in a competitive global market. Inside Washington, however, the reaction was swift and volatile. A company long regarded as a symbol of American industrial dominance appeared to be shifting core operations to a neighboring nation. Within minutes of the announcement, Donald Trump voices anger on Truth Social, calling the move a betrayal of American workers and vowing retaliation. He warned that the United States would not accept the outcome without consequences, signaling that the issue could rapidly escalate into a broader political confrontation. Analysts caution that this is not merely a routine corporate reshuffling. The transfer of high-value contract to Canada raises the prospect of a long-term migration of expertise, capital, and employment. Over time, that shift could rebalance power in an industry the United States once dominated with near-absolute confidence. As Canadian facilities take on increasingly complex work, they also accumulate institutional knowledge that strengthens their global standing. The timing intensifies the political stakes. With the 2025 election cycle approaching critical phase, Trump's central campaign narrative faces renewed scrutiny. He built his message around protecting American industry and reversing decades of manufacturing decline. Yet the headlines now challenge that promise. Just days earlier, at a rally in Michigan, Trump confidently declared that no foreign power could seize control of America's industrial destiny. That declaration collided sharply with images of Canadian leaders celebrating their aerospace success in Montreal. Canada's Prime Minister stood alongside engineers and factory workers, presenting the new project as evidence of national competitiveness and global relevance. The images circulated rapidly online, fueling pride north of the border while provoking anxiety and anger among American audiences. In regions scarred by previous factory closures, Boeing's decision reopened deep wounds. Workers fear that history may repeat itself, with jobs slowly migrating away despite assurances that protectionist policies would prevent such outcomes. Economists warn that the implications could be far-reaching. As Canada locks in long-term contracts tied to capital investment and innovation, thousands of American jobs may gradually shift north. Labor unions responded with sharp criticism, arguing that American workers laid the foundation for the aerospace industry and are now paying the price of policies that fail to anticipate corporate responses to tariffs. Critics across the political spectrum suggest the situation exposes the unintended consequences of rigid trade measures. By introducing instability and higher costs, tariffs encourage Boeing to seek alternatives where operations could be managed more efficiently. Canada emerged as a natural choice, offering proximity, skilled labor, and freedom from escalating trade friction. Democrats were quick to seize on the moment, framing the outcome as a cautionary tale about isolationist trade strategies. They argue that modern supply chains depend on international cooperation and strategic integration, not blunt constraints. As the debate intensifies, the aerospace shift has become more than a business story. It now stands as a symbol of the complex forces reshaping global industry and the political risks faced by leaders who promise simple solutions in an interconnected world. Within the Republican Party, unease is spreading among lawmakers who represent districts where aerospace employment is not just important, but essential to economic survival. These officials understand that if Boeing begins losing ground or shifting more operations outside the United States, the political consequences could be severe. In states such as Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where elections are often decided by narrow margins, aerospace jobs anchor entire communities. Any perception that those livelihoods are at risk could prompt voters to reconsider long-standing loyalties and reassess who they believe is truly protecting their economic future. That AS North America absorbs the significance of this shift. Global competitors are watching closely. Airbus and major Asian aerospace manufacturers recognize that moments like this rarely occur. If Boeing restructures operations to reduce exposure to tariffs, rivals may see opportunities to expand their footprint inside the United States. Partnerships, supply agreements, or future contracts that once appeared firmly secured could suddenly be open to negotiation. What began as a regional trade adjustment now has the potential to reshape competitive dynamics across the global aerospace industry. For American workers, the anxiety surrounding these developments is both immediate and personal. The move toward Canada raises fears of a broader relocation trend. If Boeing transfers production today, many worry other corporations could follow tomorrow, especially if they conclude that profit margins and supply chain stability are threatened by trade policy. This possibility places the United States in a precarious position and raises difficult questions about its ability to sustain leadership in an industry deeply tied to national pride, technological innovation, and defense capability. The implications for Donald Trump's personal image are impossible to ignore. His political brand has long centered on the promise of "Made in America," a phrase used to symbolize resistance to globalization and a commitment to protecting domestic labor. Yet one of the most iconic companies in American history now appears to be investing more heavily beyond U.S. borders. While the administration continues to apply pressure on China and Europe, it is Canada, a long-standing ally, that has emerged as a primary beneficiary of the current dispute. Analysts argue this contradiction strikes at the core of Trump's message, particularly for workers who believe tariffs would guarantee stability rather than introduce new uncertainty. AS headlines highlight factory transitions and political leaders trade blame. Voters are beginning to reevaluate long-held assumptions about the effectiveness of the America First doctrine. For some, the promise of protection now seems more complicated than previously imagined. The gap between rhetoric and outcome has become harder to ignore, especially in regions that have already endured decades of industrial decline. Canada views the moment through an entirely different lens. Officials in Ottawa describe the shift as a milestone that confirms the country's growing strength in sectors once dominated almost exclusively by the United States. Billions of dollars in contracts and new technological initiatives are set to flow into major hubs such as Montreal and Toronto. These projects are expected to support not only manufacturing jobs, but also research, development, and advanced engineering. Universities and research institutes across Canada anticipate a surge in funding and talent as partnerships with Boeing deepen. This collaboration between academia and industry is projected to strengthen Canada's aerospace ecosystem and fuel long-term growth. Over time, these investments could elevate the country's status as a serious global contender, capable of competing with long-established aerospace powers. Critics of Trump argue that this outcome illustrates the unintended consequences of tariff-heavy policy. In their view, restricting trade did not fortify the domestic market as promised. Instead, it encouraged corporations to seek cost-effective alternatives that bypass tariffs altogether. By introducing uncertainty and higher costs, the policy may have pushed companies to look elsewhere for stability and efficiency. Supporters of the administration counter that such judgments are premature. They maintain that the full effect of the trade strategy have yet to materialize and argue that if domestic demand strengthens and incentives improve, companies could still bring production back to American facilities. According to this view, temporary adjustments should not be mistaken for permanent shifts. Even with that defense, the symbolism of Boeing's move remains powerful. Canada is celebrating a major achievement while the United States grapples with widespread concern. Trump faces an erosion of confidence at a sensitive point in the campaign, precisely when unity and reassurance are most needed. In communities already strained by economic pressure, families in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania fear a familiar pattern repeating itself. Memories of lost factories and vanished jobs remain vivid, and the prospect of another major employer reducing its domestic footprint has reignited deep frustration. Voters in these regions understand what is at stake. As political rhetoric grows louder, the underlying question becomes unavoidable. Has a trade war launched to protect American industry begun to weaken the very sectors it was meant to defend? Boeing's decision has come to symbolize that dilemma. The move marks a turning point in North American trade relations. For Canada, it represents validation of long-term investment, workforce development, and industrial strategy. For the United States, it highlights the potential risks of rigid tariff structures and intensifies concerns that policies designed to create stability may instead introduce vulnerability. The development arrives at a moment when Trump's leadership is under intense scrutiny and when political opponents are eager to capitalize on any sign of weakness.